There's something about this time of year when summer starts to wind down and cooler nights roll in that makes me want to nest. I want to light candles, wrap up in a blanket, cook something that makes the kitchen smell good, and just fall in love with being inside and at home after a very busy summer. If you're feeling that too, Macy's has everything you need to cozy up your space and treat yourself while you're at it. Whether you're dreaming of curling up in buttery soft hotel collection sheets, upgrading your kitchen game with all-clad cookware, or giving your space a whole new refresh, Macy's has you covered from room to room. Shop now at Macys.com or in-store.
As soon as I got the job at CNN, I said, I want to have a divorce.
Today's guest is journalist and author Alison Kosik. She was formerly at CNN for 15 years, interviewing some of the best and brightest CEOs, investors, executives.
I was CNN's business correspondent for 15 years, often reporting from the New York Stock Exchange. But in my own life, I didn't manage my own financial life. I let my husband handle all things financial, which wound up being the biggest mistake of my life because when the marriage went bad, because I had relied on him, I felt stuck in the marriage.
We're going to be diving into her book, What's Up with Women and Money, and we're going to get into why women don't have the confidence to do certain things that men do.
I grew up with an emotionally abusive dad. I grew up around a lot of emotional terrorism, basically, I would call it. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, so that affected my ability to make decisions about my money.
One of the first guests I had was like, if women talked about money the way they talk about sex and family, how much further along would we be? I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and this is Superwomen. Each week, inspiring women are interviewed to uncover the unexpected journeys, the challenges, and the unwavering spirit that makes them powerful. Get ready to be motivated by stories of resilience and discover the keys to unlocking your own potential. I'm so happy we get to do this. It's a long time coming.
It has really been.
We made it happen.
I think I've talked to you on the phone a bazillion times, and I've yet to meet you in person, and this is the first time. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love the topic of your book.
Thank you.
And I figured you're highly qualified as someone who's been interviewing so many people. Before we get into the book, talk to me about your career. You were at CNN for 15 years. Did you always know you wanted to be in journalism and interviewing some of the brightest and best minds?
I always knew I wanted to get into journalism. I never pictured that I would actually be interviewing some of the brightest and best minds. But I think, honestly, since like 12 years old, I remember I loved to write. So I lived in Miami, and the Miami Herald wound up having a lot of times I would scour the newspaper, and there would be these like writing contests. I would enter these essay contests. And the funny thing is I would win. I think, honestly, I don't know if I won because of my talent or because I was probably the only person who was actually entering these contests, but I would win. And that would actually give me some confidence that, hey, maybe I'm a good writer. Maybe I should get into journalism. And I loved watching Peter Jennings at the time. And so that turned into reporting for the Sun Sentinel when I was in high school, and then really getting into it when I was in college at American University. I worked on Capitol Hill doing anything and everything in television, knowing that I wanted to be a reporter. And I had my first real TV reporting job in Corpus Christi, Texas. Loved it. Really loved it.
So I've interviewed now a couple of journalists, anchors, and they always got their start. And it sounds like this is how you get into it. You start in a very small city. You get noticed, and you start moving up the stations. Is that kind of how it was?
It's how it was. And it's crazy now that that's not really how it is, because the point of starting small is that you make your mistakes in a smaller area where you're not hopefully impacting too many people. But, I was able to make my mistakes back then and learn from them at an early age. And I really feel like I earned it, because that wasn't my first and last stop in a small market. That was the first of many small markets, but I loved every one of them.
Did you know that this was the path so you weren't discouraged by being in many small markets? Because I feel like in New York City, if you get many small jobs, people are like, I'm going to be a failure. I'm never going to get the big job.
I wasn't discouraged. I did feel like I wasn't going to get the big job, though, because as you can imagine, it's a really competitive field, TV journalism. I did jump out of the TV journalistic space for a while, and I hated being out of it. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for a pharmaceutical company, and I couldn't even stay there a year. I was like, oh, I have to get back into journalism.
What made you make the jump? Then how did you go back? Did you have to start all over again?
I was actually laid off. I worked for a streaming service just outside of Washington, D.C. I covered the politics of the energy industry. And we were sort of before our time where streaming wasn't really accepted. And we were live at the top of every hour. It was called Energy News Live. I loved it. I loved covering Capitol Hill, but it folded and I happened to be pregnant at the time. So had the baby, took some time off, thought, you know what, maybe I'll have a saner schedule and I'll become a pharmaceutical sales rep, and jumped into that and thought, this is not where my passion is. And so I got back into TV journalism, getting in with a bureau on Capitol Hill called Hearst Argyle Television. And it was hard. It was hard getting back in because it's hard to get out of TV journalism and jumping back in. But this person who headed the bureau had faith in me. And that really helps so much, especially in journalism. You have to have people to advocate for you and believe in you.
Were you nervous going back knowing that you were a parent at this point and knowing that the hours are totally insane? Like before we started, you're going to be working all night tonight. You just got the call.
Yes, I did. I'm going to anchor tonight. Normal anchor called out sick. So yes, going in at 10:30 tonight. I'm used to that crazy schedule and I wasn't nervous about the schedule. I guess I was just used to it.
Right.
And that's what news is. You just run toward it.
Yeah, I have a friend who's in it and like she's on call. And so it's like the shuffle with the kids. I'm always like, I think I'm crazy, but at least I know, like, I'm not going to call out of the blue, you know? So it's always interesting to see that dynamic play out.
Yeah. I think just figuring out how to be nimble and how to be flexible. And at the time, having help with I had my daughter then, and then my son soon after that, but having help certainly, I wouldn't be able to do it without that.
So when you were ready for the big job at CNN, where were you and what do you think set you apart that they said, okay, she can do this?
I started out I was leaving another job and I got the call believe it or not, as I was leaving that job. It was like kismet. And then the call came from Atlanta, a sweet woman who said, Alison, we need you for maternity leave fill-in at the stock exchange. And I said, but I've never covered business news before. And she's in Atlanta, really sweet. She goes, oh, darling, don't worry about it. You'll learn it on the job. I was like, really? She's like, yes. I was like, all right, let's do it.
Did you have any doubts at that moment? Like I hate the word imposter syndrome, but did you have any like, oh shit, I'm going to go cover big news?
Hell yeah.
Okay. So then what made you go, but I'm fucking taking it?
Because you know what? I had confidence that in my ability as a journalist, because with anything as a journalist, you have to be able to tackle any subject at any given moment that you don't necessarily know about. Take COVID, for example. None of us heard about COVID. But we all as journalists covered it. You know, you read, you research, you do lots of interviews, you just gather information from the right sources. You check 2-3 times and make sure they're right. And so I know that. I have that discipline, so I had the confidence, but I did have imposter syndrome. Of course I did. I mean, going to the big New York Stock Exchange every day, I mean, that alone was intimidating for me at first, but it wound up being like a second home for me, just even going there, because that became my second office kind of at the Stock Exchange, you know, let alone the CNN building, but being there at the Stock Exchange and just the excitement of it, it really was invigorating.
Okay, so why money? What got you interested in money?
This book, actually, What's Up with Women and Money, came from my own personal story that, as we just said, I was CNN's business correspondent for 15 years, often reporting from the New York Stock Exchange. But in my own life, I didn't manage my own financial life. I let my husband handle all things financial, which wound up being the biggest mistake of my life, because when the marriage went bad, because I had relied on him, I felt stuck in the marriage. I had 2 kids under the age of 10. What if I made a mistake? What if I lost all of our money? So I wound up staying in the marriage years longer than I should have. So I really became the personal story in this story that many women can actually understand, because when I got through that chapter in my life, I realized that there are a lot of women who can relate to this, but it's embarrassing to talk about. And at least for me, there was a lot of shame in it. I was really embarrassed that I didn't have confidence in managing my own financial life. But I found out that across the socioeconomic scale, whether you're married, divorced, widowed, single, whether you're a high earner or a low earner, many women can relate to this, that you're just not involved as you should be. And I wrote the book to help women not make the same mistake I made and not being involved enough.
When you decided that he should run everything, were you saying like, well, I don't know anything, or is it just easier? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, when you took your matters into your own hands, where did you even start and how did you get your information?
I let him do it because I thought he knew it better. And by the way, I hear lots of women saying that too. Oh, just let him handle it. He knows what he's doing more than I do. I was also super busy at CNN and raising 2 kids. So yeah, I let him do it all because it was easier. And sure, I had the knowledge, but I think a lot of women can have that knowledge and have the information, but not feel empowered or confident to actually take action on that information because you don't actively do it every day. So you don't earn that confidence that you should have. And where did I start? As soon as I got the job at CNN, I said, I want to have a divorce. And I didn't want to get alimony, so I didn't want that from him. And I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet and have a full-time job. So once I had the full-time job, I figured I would just figure it out. And I did. I figured it out. I made tons of mistakes. One of the first mistakes I made out of our divorce was I had to go turn in my leased car. And I thought, how hard can this be? I'm a smart girl. I mean, I understand about what I can pay per month for the car and what I can handle, and I'm just going to go wing it. And so I completely fucked it up the moment I walked in. The salesperson walking in, he says to me, hi, you're looking to lease or buy? How much do you want per month? How much do you want to pay? And I told him, and I completely released all leverage. I didn't know it. So I had no idea I was being probably ripped off. And it was only during the time I was writing the book that I realized after interviewing a bunch of experts that, yeah, I was probably ripped off. So there's a better way to buy a car.
And that's in the book.
That is in the book. I actually walk you through step by step how to buy a car. The funny thing is you think you have to walk into the dealership. You don't. 90% of the work you have to do when you buy a car, you can do literally from home, doing on email.
So then this is a personal question. You think buying a car is better than leasing a car?
It depends on the interest rate.
Okay.
I actually personally believe that buying a car is probably better. I'm lucky that for the leased car during COVID, I was able to buy out my car because at the time we couldn't buy cars. But in retrospect, I think I would prefer to buy the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. I bought my car, but I did that because it's a business, so I could write it off, which I learned on Instagram of all places.
Yeah. And you actually talked about that with me, which by the way, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Rebecca.
What?
You are in my book. I interviewed you in my book.
That's right. I am in your book. I forgot that we talked about the car though. That I got my news from Instagram.
Yeah, well, it's important to make purchases as much as you can with a tax-advantaged wrapper, isn't it?
It is, and I think there are, again, check with your CPA or your a tax professional. There's a lot of things that no one will tell you. I made a huge mistake at the end of this year. I was like paying my kids, and then someone was like, "No, you have to put them on payroll to do that." And then someone else was like, "No, you don't." And I was like, there needs to be like a primer, of helping people with this. So this is a good start.
Yeah, the same thing goes for financial literacy. We're not taught this stuff in school, and somehow we're supposed to, through osmosis, I guess, learn it. And so, there's the tips and the tools and the mechanics of it. And then there's well, am I even able to do this stuff when I see the tips, tools, and mechanics of it?
Right. So you taught yourself everything that you talk about in the book.
Yes.
At any point, did you say to yourself or have that feeling of like, I can't believe I don't know the answer? Because I feel like so many women feel that way and then they don't ask the question. And how did you get over that?
Yeah. So let me rephrase this. I actually taught myself how to do these things through interviews. I did dozens of interviews and lots of research. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff really the right way. And I'm certainly not an expert and I'm always learning. It's literally by writing the book, it was like a lesson, whether it's how much life insurance you need to carry. Many Americans, but many women especially aren't carrying enough life insurance. This is important if you have really young kids. Disability insurance, do I need it? It's really something you should think about depending on what kind of line of work you're in, especially if you're self-employed. And at the very least, you should take the disability insurance offered by your company if that's offered. Long-term care insurance, something none of us want to think about, but something that you should think about probably, at least in your 40s.
Especially as a woman, because we don't die as quickly as the men. So we need someone to take care of us if our children don't want it, right?
Yeah, women live longer than men. So we really have to understand where long-term care insurance and how long-term care fits into our financial plan. Absolutely. Yeah.
So in a time right now where I don't know if we're in a recession yet or not, it keeps being like, are we or are we not? People are still having fabulous vacations. We're still buying eggs for $12. I think it can feel overwhelming. Like, how do I now fund some of these things? And so do you recommend a place for someone to start?
I think the control starts with yourself. Yes, we're seeing everything happen in the economy. Something's always going to be happening in the economy. It's never going to be perfect. And so what you can control is how much money you're bringing in, as much as you can. And if it's not enough money, then you should probably get a side hustle. And I know you don't want to hear that, but maybe you have to have 2 jobs. But whatever money you have coming in, you can probably have a decent amount of control over. How? You make a budget. And I know that sounds boring, but if you make a budget that you can stick to and that you really do follow and maintain, you can try to have that control where there's no control in the economy over what you're buying at the grocery store, how much your insurance is going up for your car or your home. And, my suggestion is, you're going to put 50% toward your needs and 15% toward your investments and 15% toward your non-monthly expenses. And you're going to put a percentage toward your emergency fund. And these are all things, and you sort of break up into a pizza pie. And I gave you percentages, but with your budget, you really have to figure out what works for you. So I give suggestions on several ways to budget, but ultimately it's on you. You have to really be self-aware of what you're capable of maintaining. And that's really the trick about any kind of budgeting is be honest with yourself. Can you really maintain what you're setting out to do?
I mean, it's that way with anything. It's that way with losing weight, getting healthy. I mean, it's just another area of your life that you have to apply discipline to, that you're like, great, now I got to go to the gym. Great, now I got a budget, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to be honest with yourself. So my suggestion in the book is when you come up with your budget, don't do it through an app. And it sounds awful and tedious, and it is, but it's worth it, I promise, is go through by hand, because only then can you see what expenses are leaving your bank account and your investment account, let's say, and you can say, wait a minute, I don't need to have that expense of paying for coffee every day out. And that adds up to a small car payment every month. And instead, I'll make the coffee at home and make that car payment with that extra, $150 I just found by not going out for coffee every day.
Yeah, it blows my mind when I see people on their morning coffee walks. I'm like, we make our coffee at home. Like, I would never leave my house to go get coffee. I need it sooner than that. Selfishly, I need it sooner than that. And I'm not going to go pay $10 for a coffee.
Yeah. I mean, listen, once in a while is great. I don't want to take the joy out of life. I really don't. And it's convenient. But if it's hurting your budget and it's hurting you in a way where you can't make ends meet, I mean, you have to stop and be honest with yourself about what you're doing.
Right. So what would you say the most important chapter would be? Because one of the first guests I had was like, if women talked about money the way they talk about sex and family, how much further along would we be? And again, it's like this taboo subject, and no one wants to say what they make or what they're investing in or how much they got on a deal. So what would be the chapter that you would say is key?
I love chapter 1. And it's basically,
how did we get here is the chapter.
How did we get here? And yeah, because we are career driven, we're earning our own money. But the problem is, what I found statistically, women aren't managing it. We're letting our husbands do it, or we're just flat out avoiding it. And if you think you're thinking this is just a traditional woman's way of thinking. That's not true. I saw stats in there. I quote stats in my book that show that women from ages 20 to 34 are perpetuating this, how they think that their significant other can handle it better than them, and that they're showing even more than the older women that they're not in control of their finances. And a good part of it is confidence.
So did you find out in any of these interviews why we don't get that confidence?
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, it could be there's just a cultural conditioning going on that oftentimes boys are often raised differently than girls. Boys are introduced to the family finances earlier than girls, and girls can grow up to be women who can avoid money. And that avoidance, if you avoid anything, you can become fearful of it. And that avoidance can lead to a lack of interest, and that leads to a lack of information, which can lead to a lack of confidence in being able to tackle this thing. And this thing becomes this ginormous mountain to climb, and you think it's a huge challenge, and you say, oh, I'm just not going to do it. And that's from just cultural conditioning. It could be something that how we were raised. It could be something, and this was in my situation. I grew up with an emotionally abusive dad. I grew up around a lot of emotional terrorism, basically, I would call it. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, so that affected my ability to make decisions about my money. It could also be just we're overwhelmed at work. We're busy raising kids. We're at our jobs. The last thing we want to do when we get home from a busy day is
get out the checkbook and pay the bills.
Yeah, that, or just roll up our sleeves and dig into some research on financial literacy. Doesn't that sound exciting?
Now that I'm almost 45, it does, but definitely not what I would want to do in the first 30 years of my life.
Yeah. So, I mean, exactly. It makes your eyes kind of roll when you think about it. So, and for me, that was the same way too. So I wanted to write something that was more relatable and fun and I didn't want to be judgy with how, whether we are involved or not. I wanted to just lay it out. Here's how to do it. And here's why you're able to do it. Here's the confidence piece of it.
What would you say you've done differently in this marriage than the first one now that you've learned all of this?
So I'm engaged.
Oh, you're
No,
engaged.
that's
I'm sorry.
okay.
In this partnership.
It feels like I've been married to him. We've been together 12 years, going on
Wow.
13. I know. We'll get married at some point. With our relationship, we definitely talk about money all the time. We talk about our investments. We talk about how we want to buy our next home, possibly, or maybe even rent. It's always in the conversation, and we talk about things together.
So this might be too historical and too nerdy, but like, why is it that most people get married and then everything is each other's as the normal? Like, oh, okay, now we're married. Everything is each other's.
Oh, you mean you shared?
Yeah. Like most people I know, they get married and then everything is pooled. And in my household, it's not pooled. It's separate and then joint. And we each contribute percentages of our income to the joint.
I love that.
But why is it the norm that like I go to my friend, she's like, I have to ask my husband if it's okay if we do this. And I'm like, but you make money too. Why are you asking his permission?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm all for keeping things separate. I think it's probably easier to pool it together. I think that if that answers your question, I think that's why when people get married, they pull it together. You know, there's a stat of millennials that, 88% of millennials who get married fully intend to be involved in those long-term financial decisions. And when they finally get married, only 51% are involved. I think it's just easier to just pull it together. And once again, we get busy. And, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that's life. Life gets in the way. The trick is to do what you do, Rebecca, and that's to not let life get in the way and to figure out a structure where you can still share the expenses, but still have money on your own and still have credit under your name. That's super important.
Right. The credit part is really important.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Under your name, not both. Because
Yes.
I've heard of scenarios where, in this case, not all husbands do this, but the husband ruined the credit. So then the wife couldn't get, when they divorced, a credit card, a car, a lease, right?
Yeah, that's where the involvement piece comes in. Totally. I mean, don't just let him take the reins on everything. You need to know, what does his life insurance policy say? Does he have disability? How much debt is your family carrying? Where are all your assets? Who are the beneficiaries on your accounts? When was the last time you checked them?
Yeah.
Bet you haven't checked in a while. You want to go ahead and do that. Not you, but
Yeah.
it's not something we think about. And what are the passwords to all the accounts?
Yeah.
And even if you are involved with that stuff, you still have to be involved in the investments too, because you want to be the check and balance in what, let's say, your husband is investing in.
Right. And one thing I learned, which is really important, and I'm going to fact check you for, when you said the beneficiaries, like, it's not just that, but it's also like, and it's uncomfortable conversations. Like, we did our will and trust. And it's like, okay, if you die, then who is the secondary person? And if they die, who's that person? You're going down the line and you're like, oh my God, I'm naming all these people that I think I'm going to outlive, but what if I don't? And it's important to kind of have all that sorted out, right?
Absolutely. And I do have a chapter on estate planning.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah. I mean, and it's hard to get into that estate planning conversation, isn't it? I mean, talking about,
we had arguments over it. And I was on a podcast as a guest and I opened the wound because I talked about our estate plan on the podcast. And I said, I have a floozy clause. And if he shacks up with another woman, then right away, all my assets go into a trust for the kids. And anyways, it went viral. And that wound was like ripped open because it wasn't an easy conversation to get to that place.
No, but you have to lay out scenarios. And that's what you do when you say, okay, who's going to be taking care of my kids? Where's the money going to go? And you have to put a second, third, fourth person in place. And that's not easy to do.
It's not. Or when someone comes to you, like my cousin came to me and said, can you be my second person? And I was like, I absolutely cannot be your second person.
Well, you know what? That takes a lot to admit that. And what was the reaction, Rebecca?
I said, I have 4 kids and I don't want you to die, but I can inherit 2 more. Please.
See, but at least you're honest. And that's important to have those conversations now when you're alive.
Yeah.
You don't want to list somebody without asking them. So,
So the book, I'm assuming, is available everywhere.
It is.
Okay. And you have an audiobook or a Kindle. It's on all the places.
It is. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why, today people want to avoid all effort. So someone wants to go to ChatGPT to get all of their information. Tell me why they actually need to read your book or listen to it.
Because I did actual research and did interviews, and I really wrote this book through a journalist lens, which means I checked my facts and I checked them twice and I checked them the third time. And I also have lots of stories in there, so women who read it won't feel so alone, that these are real life stories. A lot of them are anonymous because it took a lot to get these interviews done, because a lot of the women I interviewed were ashamed at the bad outcomes that they're experiencing now because they weren't involved in their finances, because they let their husbands handle all things financial in their life. And I think that by bringing financial literacy to life through actual stories that stick is part of the confidence building process that I think is lacking in a lot of financial literacy volumes that you see sitting on store shelves and library shelves. It can be overwhelming. I think the trick to financial literacy is making it easy, accessible, and relatable. And that's what I really try to do in this book.
I love it. It's time to get your shit sorted. So you have to read Alison's book, What's Up with Women and Money. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, take a second to rate and review the show wherever you're tuning in. It really helps others find the podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff and at RM Superwomen, or for a slice into my personal life at Becky Minkoff. And don't forget to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. See you next week.